All right. Crazy time right now, right? Are you going
To be a tech,
Anything, right?
Something.
Oh, well, I'm on a wait list. They filled up all the buses and I'm waiting to.
All right, y'all, let's get started.
What?
Thanks for joining me here this evening for a little Maimonides. I know the most recent emails said readings from medieval and modern. My next talk in 2 weeks will be more modern. This one, we're gonna stick with the main man himself, Maimonides, the great eagle, the Rambam, right? We're gonna do Moshe ben Maimon. Yeah, please.
How about Eric, though? Can you introduce yourself?
I will get there.
Okay.
He's more important, so he goes first,
Yes.
right? And then me speaking on behalf of him and presenting my version of him. My name is Erick Dreff. I am a scholar, among other things, of Spinoza and the history of Jewish rationalism. So when Rabbi Zatz was talking about this program in Sinai and Synapses, I lit up and I was very happy about it, and I couldn't have been happier that we got the grant, and everything that's going on has been super interesting to see happening. So my interest in terms of my field of study, right? I study that vein of Jewish intellectual history that takes science seriously. And that always does, not just seriously, but as primary. Right? And one of the people that we study centrally is Maimonides, right? So Maimonides was born, I'm just going to jump right into her. So Maimonides was born in 1138, died in 1204. He was born in Cordoba, Spain, although within 10 years, a fanatic Berber sect from Morocco came in and invaded Spain. And so he left with his family. Oddly enough, and counterintuitively, he left into Morocco and into the Muslim world rather than up into Christian Europe. We don't know too much about his life from here on out. He shows up in Akka like 12 years later or something like that. Not particularly impressed with the Jewish community there. And then eventually finds his way to the court of Saladin in Fustat, old Cairo. And that's where kind of the rest of his life picks up, and that's where he writes some of his other works. So in this, for just to put some more context in terms of his chief works, right, the main ones we're going to deal with today are the Mishneh Torah and his Guide of the Perplexed. Now, the Mishneh Torah was written in 1180. It is a 14-book compendium of Jewish law. It is a systematic treatise, and in short, it is dogmatic, and it ends Talmudic debate, right? There's a reason why, okay, obviously, the rabbis will debate even that, okay? But on the face of it, right, to an extent, right, he's trying to put an end to back and forth that has, on one reading, handcuffed Judaism to an extent. And he wants to kind of allow Jews to, I don't want to say, but enter the world, start doing a little bit of science, doing a little bit of marketing and a little capitalism and market and things like that, but to study non-Jewish sciences, if you will, right? He sees the benefits of such an approach in the Islamic world. He obviously deems this as absolutely attainable and capable for Jewish people. And this is part of what he's trying to do. Right? So he writes this book, gives us a bit of the law. And then 11 years later, he comes up with a book called The Guide of the Perplexed. Right? And this book, if you're in the Orthodox or in the Yeshiva world, doesn't really exist, right? The study of Maimonides kind of ends with the Mishneh Torah for the most part. Whereas if you're in the Ivory Tower, you read nothing that came before, and the Guide of the Perplexed is literally the only thing you read. Maimonides is a man of many hats. He was a man of a lot of skill. At the age of 10, he wrote a treatise on Aristotelian logic.
Of course.
What?
On Aristotelian logic, on the categories. The 10 things that one can say about something: its place, its position, its size, its shape, its
At
relation,
10.
its, yeah, right? At the age of 10. This is obviously to say something about him as a genius, right? But this is also to be commended to the ancient Islamic curriculum, which actually we have proof is literally directly taken from the last school of philosophy in Alexandria in 519 and systematically carried over into the Islamic world, right? So this is what you learned. This is how you learned. You studied your Bible or your Quran or whatever to learn your language. And then once you learn how to speak and write, you started with Aristotelian logic. This is just how it works. Pretty wild, right?
So much for the 3 R's.
Yeah.
Not doing that in public schools now.
I'd be surprised if a high schooler could handle Aristotelian
Really?
logic, right?
Yeah.
It's on that level. Right, so this is Maimonides. This is kind of a bracket. At the end of 1191, he releases his guide, and for the rest of his life, he is entirely focused on medical works, on asthma, on phlegm, on this medical works. Right, he spends his day and nights in the courthouse or in the library doing what he can. He comes home and he has a lineup across the block of people asking for medical advice, legal advice. He helps them until he literally can't stay up anymore. Right? He tells them, okay, I need to sleep, goes to bed, starts the day over. And that's how he spends the last 13 years of his life.
Is he trained as a doctor or as a
So,
lawyer, as a rabbi?
yeah, that is a fantastic modern question for you to ask. Back then, if you were a philosopher, if you were a scientist, you were a doctor. These were
There was
all,
no medical
these were
school.
all one and the same. Right? Because
The
you understood
barbers
the
were
causes of
surgeons.
things. Right? And we'll get into that on why that is. It's a perfect question, which leads into the rest of it, right? So hop, skip, and a jump. Okay, we come to the modern period, and we come to the modern liberal arts university, right? After the end of the World War II, a huge translation project undertaken by a person named Leo Strauss and Shlomo Pines for 20 years. I think it actually started during World War II. They were sending letters across oceans with little pieces saying, you should translate it this way, no this way, no that, right? And so eventually a translation of the guide in 1962 or 63 comes out and changes the field of Jewish studies / philosophy forevermore, right? Departments are now able to access the thought of Maimonides, and Jewish studies, which has always had to defend itself and legitimize itself in the face of Christian studies and philosophy proper, now has its great philosopher par excellence by which it can argue to join, the rest of the project and the rest of the sciences. He wrote the guide in Judeo-Arabic, right? Which tells you something about who his audience is. Everything else he wrote in Hebrew. Right? So Shlomo Pines, translator towards the end of his life, in a little bit of an interview, he was asked, right? And comes to the first quote on the page, right? What is the future of Maimonides scholarship? Oh, there's a handout. Let's pass it along. Sorry about that. Right. Right. And then over here. Right. Right. So Shlomo Pines around 1976, famed translator of the guide on the future of Maimonides studies, and if there were any Maimonideans around today, right? Says there's Leo Strauss. So how do you compare this? Just keep going. Yep. So if you're going to study Maimonides, right, you're going to want to study it the way Leo Strauss understands it. Now, who was Leo Strauss? What is he trying to do? Tricky questions. Let me try and get at it really quick. Born in 1899, died in 1973. Like, whatever you want to say about his political philosophy, he has a lot of acolytes in the neocon right. He has a lot of acolytes on the far left, right? People have taken his thought in many ways, but that leads to his political philosophy, right? In terms of what he's doing with Maimonides, Strauss has the line, right? And then it's the second line on the handout. My goal is to awaken a prejudice in my students on behalf of pre-modern forms of thought, and of which for Strauss, right, Maimonides was the archetype or the exemplar par excellence. Right? This he originally wrote in 1935, took a while for it to get all translated into English, right? But this kind of leads you to understand, right? So Maimonides, the archetype of medieval thinking, right? A counter to modernity and some of the pitfalls of modern understanding of rationalism in science, right? So we turn to Maimonides. Now, naturally, you would think that maybe I would turn to Maimonides right now, but no, who do we see on the list as the next person we're reading about? Aristotle. Right? If you were to talk about a modern philosopher or a modern scientist, and you want to talk about who are the people that they defer to or how do they understand science, you're going to make reference to people like Newton, Einstein, and these types of people, right? So the scientific authority in 12th century Muslim Spain / in the medieval world in general was Aristotle, period. Right? Aristotle set things up. Other people have commented on it and tweaked it a little bit, right? But the general principles of science were laid down and kind of memorialized by Aristotle. So if the theme of today is what is a human, and we're going to be dealing with that, right? The simplest question is, how does Aristotle define human and work with that? And quite simply, man or humanity is a rational animal, right? We are animals who are capable of reason. Now, the next question is, what on earth is reason? And what does it mean to be rational? Right? And just to follow it up, right, there's another quote that makes it a little bit more interesting. Hence, it is evident that the state is a creation of nature, and that man or humanity is by nature a political animal. Right, so nature and rationality and politics all overlap to some degree here, or at least I do.
Is the concept that man is the only rational animal, or are other animals?
It says
Are
a
there-
rational. animal.
By being the rational animal, nothing else can be rational. Right, otherwise you would have to have some sort of higher order genus that allows you to differentiate between the two, and that's not what we're doing at the level of naming a species.
So there aren't other rational animals.
It just says that man is a
It says
rational
a.
animal. It doesn't say the
Ah,
rational animal.
exactly.
Right, in order to understand why he doesn't have to say that, you have to get into his theory of species. You can only have one species that has a certain essential definition.
Does he have a backup argument that you can explain how he came to the conclusion?
Through a well, yeah.
That's another
a
class.
monster question.
Okay, sorry, never mind.
No, the short answer is, you need teleology, which actually ties into the fourth type of cause below, right? What is it to be a good human? To be a good human is to understand the way things work, to use that knowledge in the way you work, and to apply it, right? And that is rational.
But if we haven't defined rational yet,
Then it just means what is good. And then you look at what are good people capable of thinking rational.
Well, it depends on how you
define good.
I often
Are
feel
you-
that.
100%, and for Aristotle, it's being a white landowning male.
Right.
now we get to the core.
Right, right, so that kind of helps define what is good and what is that white landowning males are capable of doing. They have the luxury of philosophizing.
Even in the Muslim world,
No,
What's that?
apparently
even
not.
in the Muslim world, that's where he's coming from? Oh, we're not on Maimonides anymore.
Yeah,
Sorry,
no,
we're
but
not.
still, I
Sorry.
mean,
Are
the
women
Muslims picked this up
part of the
a
man?
whole lot off, but there's.
White doesn't mean the
Fall
same.
into the
as white.
category of.
Yeah,
civilization.
I mean,
Oh,
White-
humanity.
ruling
Humanity.
white,
Greek, he means Greek.
not
and
necessarily white.
Mediterranean.
Greek committed.
Right,
Yeah.
we will get into, actually, I edited out Maimonides' climatological theory of racism, but we'll get there and we can explain it if need be.
But his pillars is really part of his cause, is how he gets there, right? To where he has his argument for, what a man is, right? Is from his pillars of science. He builds from there
Right,
and the different foundations of, what is it made of? What is, what is it? What does change? What is it? So he takes all that and it leads him eventually to get to the place, doesn't it?
yeah, I
With,
mean,
with.
there's a reason man is a rational animal is found in his metaphysics and not in his
Yeah.
earlier works, right? The metaphysics is a late work that deals with everything after natural science. Right?
And we're all assuming that women are not rational.
No, we don't have to. There is room in his thought that allows for women to be fully rational. Right, there's absolute room, and we don't have to impart the certain assumptions and biases that might limit him from saying that either.
Okay.
Right, there's nothing
Good
that
answer.
prevents us from saying.
There's a little
No,
bit of room.
There's nothing that prevents us from saying humanity and working with the rest of the system.
Okay,
There's nothing there.
they just lived in different times.
Right, yeah, they were operating under a Galenic notion of intellect, which I mean, that's another thing.
Right.
Another day. All right, so here you have, so man is a rational animal.
Question.
Yeah, please.
So for different animals, there are like primary traits.
Yes.
I forget what
Yeah.
how you referenced that. So it's interesting, rational animal, that's saying we are, we can be rational, like how often do
We
people?
have the potential. We are
Potential.
born with the inherent potential to be rational.
Do other animals have an essential trait that we?
Is only
that-
potential.
that's only
No,
potential?
they are born fully actualized. Right,
And
the
that
dog
cannot
being
be
a
seen.
barking animal is fully actualized.
Right, it has to do with the cause, right?
What's
It
that?
has to do with the causes. Which
Yeah,
cause?
it does.
Okay.
Right. All right, so now just to follow up on rational and to understand a kind of Aristotelian notion of science and what this all means. We think we have knowledge of thing only when we have grasped its cause. Proper knowledge is knowledge of the cause. We think we do not have knowledge of a thing until we have grasped its why. That is to say, its cause. Right, this is Aristotelian rational scientific thinking. Right, and then he ends up giving us 4 types of causes, right? In the medieval world, ancient world, there were 4 types of causes: material, formal, efficient, and final. Right, what is the bed made out of? The wood of the tree. Right, What is the formal cause of it? Right, what format does it take? If you're making a bed for a human, it's gonna be about 6'5" long. It's gonna be a couple of feet off the ground because we want to be away from the earth and a little bit warmer. And so bugs can't get us. If it's gonna be for a dog, it's gonna be a little bit smaller, maybe on the ground. Right, these are the formal cause. Right, the efficient cause is where does change motion or motion come from? Right, this is the will of the builder or the idea of the person who wanted the bed or put it together. And then the final cause, right? And this is the tricky one, is that which is given in reply to the question, what is its good or ultimate purpose, or that for the sake of which something exists?
And everything has a final cause.
Everything has a
Even a
final
rock.
cause, right? So in the medieval or ancient understanding of things, or in a biblical understanding of things, cows exist in order for us to have burgers.
What was
Right?
that again?
Cows exist in order for us to have burgers. Chickens exist in order for us to have chicken nuggets. That's
And a-
just why
a
they
rock
exist.
exists.
Right,
to,
the
you know,
good and happiness of the cow does not tie into this.
I would argue though, there's parts of biblical thought that would say, that would argue against that. There's certain psalms where the animals themselves and the hills themselves praise God and things like that, right?
Right, I mean,
But
why do they praise God? Right, in order to tie it all back, and what are we supposed to learn from that? Not that we should not kill them, but let them praise God, but we
Right.
should do it as they do as well.
yeah,
It's a natural
But
process.
even,
Are we not, we don't eat red meat, because if they're on earth, eating, we don't do it, we are
Yeah.
not the humans.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the argument that you see in parts of the US on the far right. Right, when the argument that the earth was given to us and they deny climate change, it's the idea that the earth's telos, the purpose of earth
which
is for us.
Yeah.
It would be wild to give us something that we can destroy, because it's there for us to exploit, farm, mine,
Yep.
and do the rest of it.
and it,
What
and
about the us that comes after us?
What's that?
What about the us that comes after us?
Yeah, we don't do olam haba. That's not us.
even things that you may not occur to you of having a final cause actually have a final cause.
Yeah.
You may not know what it might be.
Right, I mean,
Right,
that
the
as a
pebble,
principle,
yeah.
everything has to be to give glory to God and return to God, right? That's a given, but then what does that mean?
But he
How
didn't
does
believe
that
in God.
understand-
I mean, he doesn't have God in that sense.
No,
Yeah.
but right,
Just
to
felt like a stone or whatever, yeah.
the substance, right?
So that all these causes just apply to things?
Anything, even, yeah,
A rock, I mean, a pebble, a
thought,
grain of sand,
phenomenon, any kind of phenomenon that happens in the world.
a grain of
Hard to
sand.
Apply these different causes to something.
Like what? Like, I mean, you can take something as abstract as a divorce. Someone cheated. Someone had extraneous extramarital desires. They had a will to break their promise,
To me, it gets back
right?
to a,
So-
And for the
What
sake
was
of which
well,
feeling
I'm
free for
thinking
5
in
minutes.
terms of science, okay, so
Yeah, so modern science has done away with all
Mitochondria.
three. No, so modern science has done away with all three and sticks with efficient causation.
Yeah.
For the most part.
to me, it smacks of the story of David and the spider web.
I don't know that one.
Robert, we
Tell.
talked about this, yeah. So just like everything has a purpose, everything has a matter, so David's running away from Saul. He is running because and he goes into a cave to hide. He breaks the spider web. Oh, he looks at the spider and he said, "What a useless creature." He hears Saul's men's coming. He goes in the cave, he breaks the spider web, and the spider redoes the web. Saul's men look at the cave. Can't be in there, right, Rabbi? Is that right?
So the
Yeah.
rabbis who wrote that story knew a little bit about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that, yeah.
So all right, so this all a roundabout way, just background, what is science, what is reason, and right to understand the cause of things, right? So now we come to Maimonides, right? Mishneh Torah. This is a book of law. This is a compendium of laws, halakha. And yet he starts it off with a book called the Book of Knowledge. And the first line of the entire thing is, the foundation of foundations and the pillar of all sciences is to know, and this is in direct contradistinction to believe, that there is a first existent. And the first existent is an extremely Aristotelian way of saying God, right?
And to know,
Yeah, to know. So before
And
you
how
do
do
law,
they
in
know?
order to understand law, in order to practice law, in order to talk about law,
Live as a Jew.
to live as a Jew, you must know the highest and first order existent in the reigning science of the time.
The first cause,
The first cause.
yeah.
The first existent, right? This is quite the claim to put in the beginning of a legal textbook, right? This would be like the history of American legal precedent, starting off with you need to know quantum physics. It would be hard to make a statement like that in this day and age. All right. So this is all by way of background in terms of understanding, try to understand what's going on with science. And here now we get to Maimonides is one of the pieces where he deals with how do we understand this rational endeavor? Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more? Sorry.
No
Can
worries.
you explain a little bit more with the first cause or the first event? How
Yeah.
was that got?
Okay.
For a medieval Jewish
Okay,
or Muslim?
Absolutely. So if one were physical, right, you would be able to divide it because all physical things can be divided into two.
I think they're asking for you to scroll the screen.
Yeah, I can do that. How's that? Does that work? Oh, oh God, what did I press? Okay. So the argument is you have idolatry, you have these types of thinkings of God. God might be physical, God is the God of the mountain, this, that, and eventually so you have one God, but it's a physical one. And the argument is that physicality can be divided by two. And so you don't actually have a God. Something is prior to that and more fundamental. And so you get rid of physicality. God has to be immaterial. Right? If something is immaterial, then that's how it maintains its unity. Right? And then added on to that, if it's supposed to be the first cause of something, right, then it is the generator of its own essence, right? It necessitates its own being.
It's eternal.
It's eternal. Right. And so that way you get the first existent. The first thing that exists logically is something that is non-physical and infinite in power. And that is what justifies / supports the rest of existence.
But you have that problem of how something non-material can create material.
Yeah, from one only one comes, from nothing comes, right? This is age-old Greek problems. Remember, the goal here is to never provide a full solution. We never had that, right? We're not going to. The goal here is to provide a solution that works practically and allows us to stopgap the natural human doubts that we have when we're faced with the limits of our reason.
If you understand it to be first existing, you have to be outside of physicality. You can't be physical.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're physical, then you can divide.
Exactly. And then your component parts are actually logically prior to the thing you are. And then so that means there's something prior to that.
So it takes us, trying to think out loud, and things I don't think about very often. It sort of takes us then, in terms of our current thinking, whereas science are physical things, religion and God stand outside of that.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Right.
Eternal realm or whatever.
To go just back to the issue of causes, right?
Yeah.
What is its good or ultimate purpose? This is the kind of the why something exists, right? What makes it good, right? But science, modern science at least, has consciously abdicated the
Yeah.
question of why.
Yeah.
Right? But we're humans. We ask why. And that's a problem if we're willing to accept modern science's claim of exclusive jurisdiction.
I don't know, modern science asks why constantly.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
but when they
not-
do, they start waxing philosophical.
well, they ask,
No,
They-
they do more research.
no, but somebody,
Yeah, no.
no, so to me, you're
Not-
going,
that's a-
you're,
that's a
you're,
how, not a why.
it's
right?
not a why,
No, no,
it's
no,
it's a how,
That's
it's
a how or what. You can
It's a
ask
how.
how E equals MC squared, but you can't say why.
You can say like, how does this cell divide,
Right.
right? But you can't say, why do cells exist? Right?
Right, but that's not. Right,
That's
so
that's the
not the-
metaphysical.
Okay.
question.
That's
that's-
an-
But
I
you
mean,
do sometimes
Yeah,
in
I
science
still
say,
call it
why are
why,
these cells
because I
here?
ask it all
I
day
think
long.
it's
It's
semantics in a
why,
way, yeah.
why does this happen when you do this?
Right.
but
Yeah,
that's-
you
but that's-
can't ask why,
Mhm.
scientists can't know why any of it's happening at all,
So-
before the Big Bang.
In the big
So
metaphysical.
to me, like most of
For the Big Bang,
science,
I will agree,
Yeah, okay.
yes.
like to me, most of Newtonian science is, at least, is really still very much based in this, because it's what happened before? Why or how did this happen? You keep on
Mhm.
going back and looking at the causes. And then you get to the first mover, and then you have the problem that he mentioned. But to me, how and why, you're really saying how, not
Yeah. That's the
why,
ultimate argument.
why is there this world? I mean, that's generally not a question I think science has.
But he's saying, but I think he's saying more than that. He's saying you can't really understand science if you don't know that there's a God. And in a way, that's kind of what the underlying basis is of this whole project,
Mhm.
right, of scientists and synagogues, is saying that there's a place in science for understanding the role and place of God, or our understanding of God, or et cetera. And that, and there's a, ongoing debate in science about, are all scientists really atheists?
Yeah.
Or the scientists who say, no, I believe in God. I may not understand God to be the creationist God the way some people think of it, but what caused the Big Bang to happen? God. That always ultimately you're going to get to that. And that's, I think, so in a way, this whole enterprise of what we've been engaging in this year is Maimonides, approach to
Right.
religion and
The
science.
question is, we might be able to understand what is sound science, especially as moderns. We're happy to say this is sound science, this is follow the scientific method. The problem is we have precluded our ability to say this is good science, in the sense of its ability to contribute to human flourishing in a larger sense.
Not moralistic.
It's exactly right. Exactly right. And that problem is exactly what Leo Strauss recognized. That's exactly why he turned to Maimonides. And that's exactly the beauty of Maimonides, that 800 years ago, he was well aware that science, paradigm shifts, the reigning explanation, that system by which we understand nature will change and it will evolve. And that moment in time when that happens is extremely dangerous to any understanding of the relationship between science and religion. And that's a risk that he didn't want to take.
It also seems to me that I hear people say, I know I'm here for a reason, or I know this happened for a reason. I think once you create that why something happened, you then move outside of science.
Yeah.
Now, science doesn't think about,
It doesn't do that.
it has to have a reason where the stone that is coming from the mountainside and rolling down to hit me.
It's funny. This is the third time the question of stone has been mentioned.
That's because of the famous, isn't it a famous
It's
thing?
great because when I speak next time, I'm going to make sure to mention it. Spinoza has a line that says everybody thinks they have free will. If a stone
Right.
could talk while it was falling, you would
Right.
say, I want to go to the ground.
Right. But isn't that what, doesn't Aristotle kind of, going back,
I mean,
doesn't Aristotle kind of talk
who
about
says that?
the stone has, I mean,
Yeah, Spinoza read his Aristotle
Yeah.
as well. All right, so Maimonides, right? We've got a big quote here, right? And this is the fun parable, right? So guide 351 is the beginning of the last 4 chapters of the guide, right? And he starts off going, this is nothing new. I'm not going to say anything new. This is just a nice little summary that kind of puts everything together. Obviously, what follows is completely new, right? And is way more than an average summary, right? And so here's one of the things he says. So I shall begin the discourse in this chapter with a parable that I shall compose for you. I say then, the ruler is in his palace, and all his subjects are partly within the city and partly outside the city. Of those who are within the city, some have turned their back upon the ruler's habitation, their faces being turned another way. Others seek to reach the ruler's habitation, turn toward it, and desire to enter it and to stand before him. But up to now, they have not yet seen the wall of the habitation. Some of those who seek to reach it have come up to the habitation and walk around, searching for its gate. Some of them have entered the gate and walk about in the antechambers. Some of them have entered the inner court of the habitation, have come to be with the king in one and the same place with him, namely in the ruler's habitation. But their having come into the inner part of the habitation does not mean that they see the ruler or speak to him. For after their coming into the inner part of the habitation, it is indispensable that they should make another effort. Now just put a footnote here, this make another effort is, another way to say it is additional striving. But the word that Maimonides uses there is a mystic word. It has mystic roots and gets picked up by the mystics later. And this one line is basically the beginning of the entire mystic reading of Maimonides, which I fundamentally disagree with, but that's where it comes from.
Okay.
Right, where is it? Additional striving.
Second from the bottom of the paragraph.
Right, they should make another effort. Then they will be in the presence of the ruler, see him from afar or from nearby. That admittedly is a paraphrase. I had to make some space. Or hear the ruler's speech or speak to him. Right, and right below that, you have a kind of rough outline of where we see the people. I also drew it up on
Oh,
that board
good.
right there.
That's
Right, so you have A outside of the city wall.
He ran away.
Thank you. Right, so you have,
People online can see it, but.
right, and then if you go to the next page, right, he gives you the explanation of what's going on and who's what and what's going on. Let me scoot down. So now I shall interpret to you this parable that I have invented, right? I say then that those, A, who are outside the city are all human individuals who have no doctrinal belief, neither one based on speculation, nor one that accepts the authority of tradition. He mentions who he's talking about. It's where he gives his climatological theory of racism. So in the medieval period, with Jerusalem being the equator / center of the world, right? The further you got from God / God's home, the less perfect you were.
But the Greeks said it was Athens.
Of course,
Yeah.
Jerusalem and Athens, of course, they're
And the
of
Christians
course.
say it's wrong. So
Right,
it's-
yeah, right, so that's
But
right.
that's what, so another thinker around the same time as Maimonides in Halevi is really big on, that only the Jews had prophecy, because only the Jews lived in the most perfect place for climate and things like that. I think that was the land of Israel.
Right. No doctrinal belief,
No connection.
right? The status of those is like that of irrational animals.
Just saying it for all.
And he suggests to doing terrible things with them. Those, B1, who are within the city but have turned their backs upon the ruler's habitation, are people who have opinions and are engaged in speculation, but who have adopted incorrect opinions because of some great error, or because of the error of an authority. The more they walk, the greater is their distance, and they are far worse than the first, right? These guys are actually going in the complete wrong direction. They might convince good people of the wrong thing. They are more dangerous.
The Jews will say free Palestine.
Right? Those, B2, who seek to reach the ruler's habitation and to enter it, but never see the ruler's habitation, are the multitude of the adherents of the law. I refer to the ignoramuses who observe the commandments.
Just pious Jews.
Yeah, just your average token showing up every now and then, claims they're Jewish, doesn't do much else.
I think these are the people who show up every week.
Yeah,
They just are going through the motions of. or
12th century show up every week, modern show up every now and then.
Yeah, yeah.
100%, yeah, right? You're totally right. Right?
These are your from Jews.
You're from, right? You're average, right?
But not today's from Jews.
No, not today, right?
Well,
Back.
today from Jews, today's ultra Orthodox from Jews don't read this, so yeah, he would say yes, then,
Yeah.
but not to my room.
You can see though why this caused controversy, right? The Great Eagle went through some rough patches in his early days, right? His PR campaign needed some more. Right? So now we have C, right? Those who have come up to the habitation and walk around it are the jurists who believe true opinion on the basis of traditional authority and study the law, but do not engage in speculation concerning the fundamental principles of religion and make no inquiry whatever regarding the rectification of belief.
The rabbis.
Is that the simple son?
Those are the rabbis.
That's the
No,
rabbis,
The rabbis.
right?
Your regular rabbis.
Your basic rabbis, right?
Real rabbis.
They're
Then
not questioning, they're
not questioning, not dealing with any of the science. They do a little bit of the law stuff, which is great, but they don't ask how the law came to be, what justifies it, how is it rational? They don't ask those
Yeah,
follow-up
all right.
questions. Then there's D. Those who have plunged into speculation concerning the fundamental principles of religion have entered the antechambers.
Oh.
People there indubitably have different ranks. He or one whoever who has come close to certainty in those matters in which one can only come close to it, has come to be with the ruler in the inner part of the habitation, right? So notice here, yep, he's not talking about people who have attained complete certainty. He's not talking about some super futuristic, infinite knowledge, perfect person, right? He's saying we got as close to certainty as we can. Some things can't be known with certainty, and that's okay. But at least we tried answering them. We visited some of the answers that other people have given us. We've kind of come to terms in terms of, we're never gonna know that fully, that's okay. At least they try. All right.
Yeah.
It's come to be with the ruler in the inner part of the habitat. Okay, then there goes. So long as you engage in math and logic, you are one of those who walk around the house searching for the gate. All right, so you dabbled in the sciences, you're not quite all the way in. If you have understood the natural things, you have entered the habitation and are walking in the antechambers. Natural things meaning natural sciences. If, however, you have achieved perfection in the natural things and have understood divine science, right? Understood, not have attained certainty, but just kind of be able to talk with these things and kind of engage in these issues. Right? You have entered the ruler's place, into the inner court and are with him in one habitation. That's E. We're getting closer. Right? This is the rank of the people of science, though with grades of perfection again. And then F. There are those who direct all their acts towards an examination of the beings. Now, this would sound like they're pure scientists, but with a view to drawing from them proof with regard to him, capital H, God, so as to know God's governance in whatever way it is possible. Right? So this gives us a teleology for science itself. It's not just enough to know the causes of things. Is to know the causes of things and the effects of said causes in order to better understand basic governance. Who's the ultimate governor? God.
Yeah.
Right? So we study the world to understand how God governs.
What is teleology?
That for the sake of which, it's the final cause. Telos is the Greek word for end. So teleology is end-themed thinking, or that for the sake of which. The final cause that we mentioned earlier.
What we're heading to.
Right? The purpose of thing, or that which makes it good.
How do we get from first existent, a non-material thing, whatever you want to say it is, to the fact that it governs? How do we know it governs?
Because it causes.
How do we know it causes?
Because you're here.
Because to exist and to not cause is not to exist.
Yeah.
To exist and not cause is not to exist.
What would it mean to exist and have no effect? It would be hard to say you existed.
Well, you'd be in a coma in a hospital.
Yeah, but you're still breathing and oxygen's going in, right? Like, so there's still evidence, right? There's weight on the bed, like there's an imprint of your, but you're still doing something,
Right.
right? So to exist, especially with infinite power, and to cause nothing, that's an absurd statement.
Eric, when you use the word science here. I'm sorry.
So, if you think that we exist, we know we exist, we're here, right?
Yes.
We exist. Something had to have caused us to
I
exist.
think my mother and father getting together did cause that.
Go back and back and back and back
Yeah.
and back and back. Something had to have caused all of this to exist,
Yes.
right? But nothing could have caused that to exist.
Okay, so that's still good.
Right,
Okay,
right,
so say I buy that.
yes. So
How does
how does
it-
it follow?
How does it
So-
follow that?
Oh, how
it
does it go?
governs?
There's a large chain of mediating forces that allow Aristotle to say an infinite force can be found in a finite object.
Right, but
Specifically,
I think Stacy's asking, sorry.
Okay.
How do you know then how to live because of knowing that, right?
Yeah.
Why be a Jew, right? Well, my mind might have said be a Muslim too, like it would have been fine, but how do you know how to live in relationship to the first cause? How do you know that God through your rational mind and investigation and through the tradition of our ancestors who had rational minds and investigation, they know what the most perfect way to live in the world is, governed by the first cause, God, right? Is that maybe how you would explain it?
yeah, well, God is entirely self-sufficient and independent, requires nothing. This is a great model for how to
Except our
live.
adoration.
That doesn't, God doesn't need it.
Right.
We need to do it,
Yeah,
right? And so that would be a great model on how to live. Be independent, be self-sufficient, understand things in principle, and teach others how to do the
And
same.
he would say, and Maimonides says that Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, was the most perfect of the prophets, meaning that he was a scientist and a philosopher But being a prophet meant you had a poetic imagination to be able to communicate it to people and how to live that way. So, the from Jews are still good Jews still, but they don't quite understand like what Moses understood. And our point is to really understand the ways of the world, the ways of the universe, like Moshe,
Yeah.
right? And therefore, we're living by Torah. That's what it means to live by Torah.
What is a from Jew?
Orthodox, yeah. Right,
Flat
we can not eat the third Snickers because we know it's bad for us. Or we can not eat the third Snickers because mom told us not to, right? In both instances, we're acting virtuously. Right, but the goal here is to ultimately do it from a scientific understanding. To understand calories and health and all, the brushing your teeth and all the rest of it and heartburn, right? But in an instance where you're unable to bust out your whole, like, here's calories, this is bad, right? Just don't do it or else I'm going to take away your toys. That's a perfectly good enough approach, right? So
Right.
this is how two ways of modeling the same behavior. One is through a scientific rational understanding for it that justifies it. And one is through authority
Right,
or
and so-
tradition.
And so you can look at the mitzvot in the same way, right? My mind would say, it's not as, I'll use the word you probably use, it's not as mature to look at the mitzvot as saying, I'm gonna follow all the mitzvot because God's gonna zap. I'm not even gonna do that. God's not gonna zap you. You follow the mitzvot because they're the rational way of living in the world, coming from the first cause of the whole universe, right?
Because you understand God to be
Yeah.
fully rational.
That's the key thing, isn't
That's
it?
exactly it, yeah, that's
That
the key.
original
So why don't we
definition.
design
Yes.
better?
No, they really are.
That's-
But does this follow on then, this whole, I'm not quite sure who said this, but, God is that than which nothing greater can be thought, you cannot think of
Saint
anything greater
Anselm.
than God.
That-
Yes,
yeah,
Saint
God
Anselm.
says-
Right, that's the ontological argument,
Yeah.
Yes.
right? I mean, Maimonides sort of
Where's
makes
that
use of
coming
that.
from?
That's
Saint
Augustine,
Anselm. No,
Oh,
is
okay,
it Anselm?
Augustine,
Saint-
among other people.
That's what,
This is Augustine who deals with it.
I thought Saint Anselm.
Directly with God, like who's?
Give me one more line. It's literally the next line we're about to read, right? G, the rank of G. All right, that guy. Right, we're right there, right? So as to know his governance in whatever way it is possible, these are present in the ruler's council. This is the rank of the prophets. Some prophets could only see, some from close, some from afar. One, G, spoke with God. And who in our history spoke with
Moses.
God face to face?
Moses.
Moses.
Well,
All right?
a common- No.
Doesn't that, Moses communicating with God or God, hearing God, doesn't that imply that God has some physicality, that God was able to make? like,
So,
a way
in
to-
other, literally go to an earlier chapter in the guide where he literally deals with hear and see, right? So the guide on the face of it is a book on how to read the Bible, specifically how to read it in light of what science says has to be it. God can't be physical. God can't have all of these traits, and yet the Bible is filled with physicalist language that makes it very hard to be a Jew when Muslims are walking around with their fancy Aristotelian knowledge going, that makes no sense. You guys are crazy. Right? And so what he does is like, so when the God says God sits, when the Bible says God sits, okay, what does it really mean? When it says God is on a throne, what does it really mean? When God said God, when we are in the image of God. No, we're not saying God has a body, let alone one that looks like this. No, it's our minds, right? It's the fact that we can think that is in the image of God.
Right,
So-
and so when Moshe hears God, it's not sound waves that he's hearing.
Yeah.
Right.
And the rest of the
And
phrase.
It's intellectual here.
It's not
cognition.
Feeling sounds to
No, Aristotle,
feeling
it's
sounds
raw,
to,
it's raw cognition.
American, American feel.
Protestant. It's
Over
raw,
religion,
it's-
it's
pure intellect.
pure intellect. He is a philosopher. Moses was a philosopher, just like Maimonides, Muslim colleague would have said Muhammad. was a
Yep,
philosopher.
and Jesus. So all three of them, right?
Part of how we know that God doesn't have that physicality in the same way is pointed out in like at Sinai, when we heard lightning and we saw thunder, right? So it wasn't that God actually was was doing these things through the physical thing. God had control over all these things, and we experienced it in a way that we couldn't quite understand, right?
No, Maimonides wouldn't even say that.
No, but I
Yes.
think we can understand
Yeah.
the way that God, that we get this hint in the Torah that the communication with God isn't through the natural laws as we think of it. The natural laws are totally upended.
No, the
No.
communication with God is
Entirely
specifically
natural.
through natural
Yeah.
laws. of
Yeah,
universe.
Maimonides would
Well,
go directly against that,
But why
Because
would
he
you say
the
that?
Bible's
because
not
there's
written-
nothing beyond nature.
Right, because he would say the Bible is not written, the Bible, the simple Jews can read the Bible as the story as it says it, and understand enough to live as a good virtuous life.
Yeah,
But
remember
the real
whatever
Jews,
they
the
were.
real Jews, the
Yeah,
people in E,
yeah.
F, and G, the real philosophers know that the story it's telling is not a story. It's a philosophical tract that you have to be able to read,
Another level.
a
Yeah.
totally different
Isn't it
level.
like
That
allegorical?
that
Yeah.
Sinai, it doesn't even matter if it was a historical event to my mind, really.
And the question is
It has
which is true, was it really just stories, or, and this meaning was layered on by people like Maimonides, which is also a possibility, right?
Of course.
Yeah, but regardless, there's been centuries of discussion about it.
Well, Maimonides would say Muhammad and Jesus had nothing to do with anything. They're not only Moses.
No, but that's,
Only Moses got face to face, and right, and
Face to face.
face to face is the most, and as a result of Jewish law being an eternal law, nobody can ever attain the rank of Moses or higher.
but your point is to me a very Muslim idea, and a very, because you're teaching Islam, and
Right.
a very like Baha'i idea, when every generation there is somebody like that or a few people like that. But yeah, I think that's, and Revelation is
So
But there's a
Entirely
famous,
natural.
there's a famous line in Jewish tradition, from Moshe to Moshe, so Maimonides, his first name was Moshe, right, Moses, there was no one like Moses, right?
and the second time that expression gets used is with Mendelssohn in the 18th century.
Really. So,
Both Moses Mendelssohn in the 18th
Oh,
century.
no, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm thinking. The composer.
that was
Yeah,
his-
no,
that was
the
his-
grandson, no, the.
Issues.
that was his grandson who actually was converted to
And
Christianity.
what's curious is that both instances they're used, right? And one of the things that Maimonides and Mendelssohn have in common is the fact that they urged Jews to limit their constant legalistic Talmudic thinking and to enter the rational world.
He did demythologizing.
The demythologies, right? There's a reason Mendelssohn spent time translating the Bible into German, so that they could learn German and enter the rest of the European world. Right? And why he spent so much time arguing that Jews should learn logic. There's nothing anti-biblical about logic.
You just have to read the Bible more.
You gotta, yeah, all right, the Bible first, not don't read the Bible, but just also read logic books as well. Right? So just to bracket in terms of what's going on in 351, right? Once he gives you the ranks and all these things, right? He then goes on, and there's just no room on the page to discuss, right? What is it that these prophets do at the highest level? Right? What happens when you are, E, F, and G? Right? And the goal here is like, this is levels of perfection, right? This is levels of rational understanding and investigation. But the goal here is, remember, while you might know things, right, and that's the beginning of law, the scientific knowledge has to undergird any kind of legal or political attempt. Right, so what he ends up talking about is that these prophets, Abraham, for example, or Moses, when they are, mowing the lawn or doing the dishes, they're still thinking about God and how to better govern this world in light of their understanding of the natural world. Right? He's basically following up on a Greek concept of there's two notions of perfection. You can perfect yourself, A+, good for you. But what use is being perfect if you don't perfect anybody else? Right? So good science is not just sound science, but is science put into purpose for the people. Not just to give them air conditioning and frozen meat, right? But specifically to bring them closer to God, to understand the power of God, the necessary existence of God, and to basically allow them to direct their own investigations in a Jewish way.
That's the quote I'm asking, that's a quote you have from Aristotle about politics.
Mhm.
That humans are by nature political, meaning we enact the good.
Exactly right. And then so if we are naturally political and we're rational, then an ultimate understanding is our politics should be fully rational. And our politics should be natural in that sense. Right? Not so much natural in the E equals MC squared sense, right? So yes, obviously that, but natural in the divinely guided sense. Right? In grounded and evaluated by a fundamental belief in the existence of God.
And yet,
It-
most of the killing in this world is done in the name of God.
Yep, stay tuned for my other classes. No, that's that's right.
And yet.
Right, but, you know, but my mind would say, we Jews aren't doing that, right?
You know,
Then we weren't.
I
you know.
mean, they had a political issue of being a persecuted class of people, right? But he might say, I'm guessing that the people, let's say, you know, the certain speakers of the House are turning God actually into an idol, right? That's actually idolatry. That's not real.
Maimonides' line is that those people who say they're killing in the name of God say the word God, but mean the complete opposite. Right.
So they would be the B1 people.
Yeah, they literally, yeah, quite literally, yeah. Right, exactly right.
Yeah.
Right, so we started at the end of the book, right at the conclusion. Just to finish off, little quickie, we're gonna go to the second chapter of the guide, all the way to the beginning.
Can you, before you jump?
Sure.
You're perplexing me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm with you about going through these various.
Yeah.
Chambers. I think I'm with you. And I even get the idea that it's meritorious or seems meritorious to learn more and more about your environment.
Mhm.
And that gives you a sense of perhaps awe or something related to the fact that there is some existent thing that created the environment. I still have trouble jumping from knowing more and more and more about your natural environment, and then making the assumption that there is a God on the other side of that that's directing it or creating it.
Right, so,
And that's where I'm struggling with.
right, and I can, you're right, so the fact that, I mean, it's a very modern problem to have. Right?
I am.
Allow me to approach this from, maintain that perplexity. Keep in mind, the book might be called Guide of the Perplexed, but it is not Maimonides' job to get you out of perplexity. Right? In fact, he wants you to stay perplexed. Right? Brackets,
Yeah.
Aristotelian notion of the mean, the doctrine of the mean, right? You either are 100% certain, which is a lie, because we're not God, or you doubt everything, which is insane. So the human position, the virtuous one, is the one in the middle. Thoroughly perplexed,
Always questioning.
right?
But who died and made Maimonides like God to know that this was the way it is?
Right. So I think more of what he's trying to say is he's trying to maintain, loosely speaking, to like abstractly, the connection between religion, or that which tells us why, and science, and that which tells us how.
And
Right?
I think. Yeah, go.
Specifically, not because science requires us to do that, but because humanity requires us to do that. We ask how, and we ask why. So if you are to,
Not so much.
yeah, and so if you were to
Not so
give
much after
us
being 2
a
years old.
good human, an actual, like, a rational animal, that doesn't limit us to asking how or what. We also ask why.
Right, but I think also, Meg, you might be asking. You say from your very modern scientific point of view, why do you have to believe that there's a God that? But from the medieval point of view, and there had to have been something something without a cause that caused everything with a cause. That's why.
Well, I do think that what little I know of history, people forever have sought
The answers.
why,
Right.
question
Right,
why,
exactly.
or, to have some purpose, that I know I'm here for a purpose.
Right.
Why I know this happened to me.
Right, but it's not about this, Maimonides is not big on personal confidence, meaning
Yeah,
meaning like
suffering,
you won the lottery
about
for a
you.
purpose, that's not, but the universe as a whole is here
Yeah.
for a purpose.
and the
Yeah,
human
what's that?
species as a whole exists for a
Right.
purpose.
Right, but like, to say, if you said like, oh, you know, I stepped into the street, but the car swerved away from me, that was a sign from God, my mind would say, no, that's idolatry, don't think that way, right? That's not purpose, by purpose, it means the telos of
The telos.
being a human, the telos, the purpose of the universe,
And
right?
contributing to human flourishing.
Right, when that's the purpose.
So I should stay perplexed for now.
Absolutely, right? Yeah.
You're in good
Okay,
company.
okay, but wait a second, the purpose of the universe is human flourishing?
Say that again?
The purpose of the universe is human flourishing?
100%.
For a medieval person.
But what is human flourishing? Not margaritas and cheeseburgers, but making everybody understand that
The
God exists.
size of the universe and
Well,
what are like
Their universe
this,
wasn't that big.
Yeah, they're working on a geocentric universe.
Yeah,
so-
but see, to me, you have a problem with that, because you could
So,
it's like this problem of first causes. So
Mhm.
why is human flourishing the
it's a
why?
biological
Oh,
process.
why? Because,
Before it could
well, we're the only ones with choice.
fine, but then it's still on a very shifty sand for me.
Yeah.
Because why does it have to be human flourishing? Why can't it be?
Because we're the only ones with choice.
We're the only ones that could choose to be. to
Right.
No, but
flourish.
why is that the purpose? I mean, it means you could just keep on asking, why is it?
No, there's
It's
something.
infinitum. Maybe I'm
I
missing
see where you're going, but to ask life to not be pro-life is to not understand what life is.
So
Right,
what
so
I
if
think
you direct the
antenatal point of
world?
view, or Schopenhauer,
Any
but I mean,
bugs.
Aristotle doesn't.
Right,
yeah,
but
right, I'm just saying,
Right.
are we saying that it's, the purpose is for humans to flourish?
but to me, you could
Because it
argue it's
could
wishful
be
thinking
just
to have this. I
bugs
don't know.
left,
Right,
Right, but they
or
didn't,
is the purpose
they,
for
they,
something?
they didn't have the concept so much that you could destroy the whole earth.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have nuclear weapons.
Yeah,
and-
I mean-
But we had a lot of bees, B1s
Yeah.
creating that issue.
Right, sure.
right. Yeah, tough. Okay, so let's go.
What do we do about
Last
B1s?
point.
Right.
Oh, you're supposed to kill them actively. Right,
The
they're
bee?
very
Okay,
dangerous.
that's
You're
what
supposed to
we're working on.
root- you're supposed to root them out of their society.
No one- no
In
one-
Jewish law, it's called Hilul
Meaning of the
Hashem.
ark.
Someone, Hilul Hashem means you are taking people away from God. And they could be a heretic, they could be a, like someone who brings violence upon the Jews by being a bad person, right, to the other authorities, and those are people that can get the death penalty in Jewish law.
Yeah, and so he says sometimes that we have to kill them.
Yeah.
Right, so quick little, this gets into a little bit more in terms of what science is doing.
You
So-
gotta scroll up though.
Yep. Gotcha. There we go. Years ago, a learned man propounded as a challenge to me a curious question. Ye shall be as Elohim, knowing good and evil, Genesis 3:5. The last of three senses is intended. Thus he translated, and ye shall be as rulers, and not the deity or the angels, right? The three things that Elohim might mean. Thus the objector said, humans were perfect before they could distinguish between good and evil. Their punishment was its knowledge. We were never really meant to be anything more than animals. This is paraphrased. Now, Maimonides responds in a wildly uncharacteristic, angry and sarcastic tone. He literally says, "Dear novice, if you could actually read a book longer than its title, you might learn something. If you could put down drink and stop fornicating for half a second, you might hear me to the end of my thought." This is, I mean, he
Oh
really
my
takes
God,
off the
yeah.
gloves here, right? He's just, wow, have you wildly misunderstood things, right? So it's pretty fun.
Wow.
Through intellect, one distinguishes between truth and falsehood, and that was in Adam, back in Eden, perfectly. Fine and bad, on the other hand, belong to things generally accepted as known, the world of imagination, of opinion, not to those cognized by the intellect. Humans, in virtue of their intellect, know truth from falsehood. So among these generally accepted things, even that which is most manifestly bad, namely uncovering the genitals, was not bad according to him, and he did not apprehend that it was bad. He therefore disobeyed the commandment that was imposed upon him and his intellect, and became absorbed judging things to be bad and fine. With regard to what is of necessity, there is no good and evil at all, but only the false and the true.
Oh, wow.
Right? So this here is a 12th century version of the fact-value distinction, being basically placed onto the understanding of science and religion. One provides facts, one provides causal explanations, one models existence naturally, and one deals with questions of value, of judgment, of good and bad, of absolute concerns. Right? And the important thing that Strauss, and then through Strauss brought Maimonides, is to understand that modern science has split the two and has made them anathema together. And it has done so mostly through a Napoleonic strategy of being, don't you like your air-conditioned home? Right? And through the rapid progress of scientific advancement. But the actual argument that God does not or cannot possibly exist has never been fully thought out. Right? And so no matter how far or how quick science goes, or the new paradigm shift, or whatever humans are going to be thinking in 1,000 years, whatever, however, and in whatever way it answers the how or the what, we humans still need to answer the why.
That is so optimistic of you, thinking humans will be here in 1,000 years.
Of course.
I don't
Species
think
are
so.
eternal.
I don't
Erick.
think so.
Maimonides argued species are eternal.
And why,
Maimonides didn't live in our world, did he?
Yeah, he
I mean,
didn't know about dinosaurs,
Right? That's fine.
and, and why we ask why is because that's our nature.
Yeah,
That there's no, I mean, that.
because
it's
the
because
human
that-
mind comes to
Yeah.
limits regarding thinking, physicality,
Yeah.
and morality.
Right.
There are certain things that happen that make no moral sense. Why do good people suffer? Why do bad people get good
Yeah.
things? Certain events make no sense and mind can't handle it.
Shit happens.
There's certain facts about the world,
No
you know,
more true
the
sense than
farthest
that.
reaches of astrophysics that the mind just can't handle. What happened before the Big Bang? What is string theory and all these types of things? Loop quantum gravity. The mind reaches its limit at a certain point. And it's at that point, right? There are no atheists in foxholes.
There are no atheists where?
In foxholes,
Foxholes.
Yeah,
right? And to think that one day we'll have a science that will actually get that person in the foxhole be like, hope the wind blows west. It's never gonna happen. He's gonna go, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, I hope I survive.
By human conditioning or by,
No, but yeah,
Like-
the argument is that we can never decondition ourselves to that
it's
point.
just, it's
That's
part of our
right.
psychology, yeah. It's right.
Is it
As
part of
opposed
our
to just a human
psychology,
construct?
or is it a socialized thing that's
I think
impressed
he's
upon
saying,
us?
he's saying it's part of, he's saying it's
You
part
would
of
say
it.
it's part of
He is.
Yeah,
it, right, because of the why.
Right, but he,
And
but
our
it's his job
finite
to tell
perspective.
you, you're asking the wrong right questions, or you're coming up with wrong conclusions. Right,
So,
because most people, Maimonides would say, are more like B2 or whatever, that they're answering those why questions with idolatry, right? By thinking that God has a body, or thinking that God, made them win the lottery, or thinking that, God is going to save them in the foxhole or whatever. That might be the right why question, but the wrong why answer.
right, so
And-
while Maimonides, let's be honest, wasn't quite the futurist, right? He wasn't even able to conceive of an airplane. In some passage, he goes, a flying ship, that's preposterous, right? So it's hard, obviously he doesn't say anything about AI. Okay, like so much for that, right? But in terms of some roundabout way to get to a conclusion, right, he does say something about when science starts pushing its own frontiers, when new science starts introducing itself, when the way we understand causes and the way we understand humanity and its ability to interact with the natural world, when the notion of the natural world gets even more complex and things deemed magical or something beyond even our fanciest imaginations have become real, right? The goal here is not to throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? The goal here is to always understand that the why complements the science, and that we have to understand it and put it to use in creating more perfect, rational politics. Hopefully we can do that with AI.
I have a comment,
Please.
is back to the foxhole.
Okay.
I guess I'm thinking with the backdrop of the war going on right now and other things, but I actually believe in my little head here that there are people in the foxhole who
That's right. No.
beg God to survive. They believe they're going to be whatever, reincarnated, or that they're martyrs, and that if they die, that they reach the highest point.
Quick question, reincarnated, martyrs, both of those words require a concept of God to make sense.
If you're a thinking person and you're gonna go down that path and say, oh gosh, this means I actually believe in something bigger than that.
Yeah.
But I'm not convinced that necessarily everybody is gonna sort of say, I should be praying to this God, to God.
The act of martyrdom is, to me, really like the pinnacle of this kind of
Yeah,
thing. I mean,
right.
because you're,
That's-
Maimonides was kind of anti-martyrdom, actually.
Yeah, well, you got
well-
tired of Jews being killed left, right, and center.
Right. So in the Middle Ages in Christian Europe, so Maimonides lived in Egypt. In Christian Europe at the time, Jews were killing themselves or letting the Crusaders kill them.
Yeah.
Instead of converting, they were martyrs, right? But Maimonides wrote a letter to, or Jews in Yemen wrote him a letter saying, can we martyr ourselves instead of converting to Islam, like the authorities are trying to convert us? And Maimonides said, no, convert to Islam.
no, but I
Like,
guess,
so he was against martyrdom because he saw that you turn God into an idol, by he would say Hamas has turned the idea of God into an idol that really they're worshiping violence and death, right?
Mhm.
They're not worshiping God,
Yep.
right? Or, but then the person in the foxhole, or whatever, that's saying God's going to protect me, that's also turning God into an idol. And God's just Santa Claus, there, right? Because you're a good boy, you get good things, right?
So whoever is in the foxhole planet of God is useless.
It's wrong. It's usually wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Everybody's gonna do it.
But everyone's gonna do it.
not everyone.
Because that's where humanity reaches its limit.
Right.
See, I thought you were gonna go with something else. I thought you were gonna go with, I think there are true, strong atheists who would not, to me, to me, yeah, to me, the Hamas person is, in his mind, very religious, really calling for God. And Jews like that too. To me, it's a certain, maybe I kind of feel I might be this kind of person that would not,
Right, but I think,
but
Maimonides might say, like, people who, are atheists, say, like, like Richard Dawkins or whatever, Maimonides might say, oh, you call yourself an atheist, but really you're just an idol worshiper of science.
Where would he
Right.
Yeah, that might
be on there?
Outside the city.
So there's two understandings.
suburbs,
There's two
baby.
understandings of atheism though,
Yeah.
right? Atheism, if
Very
you
much, yeah.
follow the latest discussions in religious studies, atheism is a religion of its own.
Right.
It's just a religion that has no theological notion of its ultimate value,
I think
right?
that's,
It has an ultimate value that's not theistic. That's all it is.
Yeah.
But it's still, right, but what does it worship? The scientific process,
Right.
right,
right?
exactly.
And scientism,
Yeah.
right, is eventually
Yeah,
that's what it is, right?
It worships humans.
Or
Slash the rational
or-
process. the
Rational
scientific
process,
Right, humans as exemplary of the scientific.
But even atheists only believe in one less God than all these other devout people. I
Right.
mean, you believe in Allah, you don't believe in Jesus. You
It's
believe
one
in
less,
Jesus, you
right.
don't believe in
Right.
Elohim.
but
I mean,
you're right,
So what's the difference? We all just believe.
But for Maimonides, believing that God is one is not that, it's just a one numerically, meaning God is not just one thing up there, right? Like Jesus was an actual thing, right? So, God is the, what's that?
So is Muhammad.
But Muhammad's not worshipped in Islam, right?
Allah is not,
Allah-
Allah is not Muhammad, whereas Jesus and God get
Allah is
confused.
the same
Right.
thing as Elohim, same thing as,
Right.
Hashem, that it's, right, so Muslims are much closer to Jews in that way, right?
We're
Right.
peasants.
Sure, but like, for my mind, it says this in the opening chapter.
Very much.
What I said, it's not that God is one, meaning like, there's one but not two, one but not zero, it's a unity.
Right.
Right, it's not a.
An indivisible conceptual.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
when
What
he
is
uses
that?
the word
An
God,
indivisible conceptual unity.
Yes.
We don't see that in the Shema.
no, you do.
Literally what you should be thinking.
Right,
No,
but
but-
they would say that Moses, who wrote the Shema in the book of
Was
Deuteronomy,
thinking of that.
do that, but he had to write it in a way for the.
No, but
regular-
Rabbi,
the
doesn't,
regular Jew.
Idiots
does,
be able to
The
understand
regular
it.
Yidden just think it's just
Do-
one, not two,
do-
but the smart Yidden will know that it means, you know.
the fact that you can't say its name, God's name, to me smacks of that. Like, it gets you, right,
It's a practice.
I mean, to me, it's very much like that.
It's a practice to get you to think.
Yeah, right.
And so much of halakha, much of Jewish law from Maimonides, I think, in this I learned from reading Kellner.
Yeah.
Is like to train you to think like a philosopher or philosopher and scientist or the same
After
thing.
you've said the
You know,
Shema
like,
1,000
so-
times and
yeah.
you've said V'ahavta 1,000 times, the goal is maybe on the 1,001st,
Yeah.
you will just say it automatically, but your brain will be like, what is oneness and what does it mean to love something that's one?
Right,
And then you start expanding and working on it, working on it, and working on it. And then eventually you develop a deep theology,
Mhm.
right? Is the goal. Because in your off time, you're like, maybe I'll follow up on that thought that I had when, what does it mean to be one? Does it mean one, not two? Or is it one, not two?
And Jewish law is only perfect in that it leads you to live like a philosopher, if you really understand it. There's no difference. Maimonides might say, he never says it explicitly, but it probably says it, like eating pork versus not eating pork. It's no difference, but making the distinctions of what you eat help you think about limits in your life, help you think about discipline, if you will, right? And that gets you to live like a philosopher, not, the doing gets you to the thinking, right? So Jewish law is perfect in that it's what Moses gave to us to get us to live this way, right? But in one sense, it's not, it doesn't matter, putting cheese on a burger versus not, right? Except that it gets you to be a virtuous person. Right?
So if you think about atheism, could it be actually completely consistent with God? In other words, if you're saying God is not a person, not an entity,
Yeah.
then in a way, that's what
have-
atheism
Oh,
is
yeah.
as well, to say that this
Yeah,
doesn't exist.
It's semantic.
like-
But
It's so
like
semantical.
These good things, that's,
Right.
Right.
Well, so, if
It's
you,
almost like
if
there's
you-
no distinction if you're really pure about your definition.
So-
if you
of God.
explain the guide for the perplexed to a pious yeshiva bucker, they may call you an atheist. They may even call Maimonides an atheist.
So Rabbi, when I,
But
Christianity was called atheism for 300 years in Rome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spinoza was called an atheist for 100 years. Literally, his name was synonymous with
Yeah.
atheism for 100 years.
so I'll just tell you this one story. When I joined the temple a year ago, and when I interviewed the rabbi, interviewed him, or he interviewed me, I told him I'm pretty much an atheist. I am an atheist.
Yeah.
And the rabbi said to me, well, I'll get to know you, but I don't believe in the God you don't believe in
I learned
either.
that from Zolomchek.
So who said that? And so I'm like, okay, so I joined.
What does it mean?
So-
Do you not believe it? So, okay, I don't believe in an old man in the sky either, and you
Right.
in my mind, but
Right.
but he will. Like to say it in a modern, like a contemporary way, and can take us out of the medieval world, and how do we maybe translate this into our lives as students? Tell me, Eric, if you think this, like, following this.
I'm listening.
Is like. Do you live your life with a commanding voice, in quotes, a commanding voice getting you to live in a way that is right and not wrong, in a way that is moral and not immoral, a way, then, is your Jewish life and Jewish community reinforcing that way to live, right?
Mhm.
Then you're not an atheist, because you believe that there is a right way,
Right.
or you're not an nihilist, I'll say.
Yeah.
But like, I'll take all of you nice Jews here, and you come up to me all the time and say, I'm not religious, but you're coming to shul. I'm not religious, but you're studying these ultimate questions. I'm not religious, but yes, just, it's okay to say I am, and I believe in God, right? But what does that God mean? It's not the God that our Speaker of the House believes in, and it's not the God that the baby
6-year-old.
believes in. I don't know. It's not, but Maimonides was one of the greatest Jews of all times. Might fit in with that, right?
So the uncertainty in a way is
Perplexity.
Okay, perplexity is the better term, is like every one of us here around the table would define God differently.
Right.
Right,
But it all might be
I
the
don't think
same
Maimonides
thing.
would not be into defining God differently, and only define God this way, but
No, I mean,
And-
us around the table,
for
we
sure,
all might,
for sure, but I.
and yet we might all agree.
Well, that's
on-
But I'm trying to say, I think we're on the same page, it's just we're very uncomfortable in modern American Protestant world. That tells you that God is your big buddy that rewards you,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so therefore I don't believe in that. Therefore I'm an atheist, but that doesn't follow, right?
Yeah.
Because, the famous atheists are giving straw man of what religious tradition actually says, right? And like Maimonides didn't make this up, he's basing it, like, he's reading Aristotle, reading
Rabbi, you've been,
the Islamic philosophy, but he's also reading the rabbis and the Bible in a way that you can read them, right? And so, this is also a Jewish tradition.
So Rabbi, if Maimonides doesn't believe, there's different ways of believing God, his way is like good. Would he then say, we are atheists if we don't buy?
He might be right.
yeah.
Oh, no, that's that.
Yeah. There was not really, I don't know, if I'm wrong here, there's not really a notion of atheism, meaning that, like, you were either a Jew or a Muslim, or,
yeah.
or not in Egypt at the time, right?
So in that book, when bad things happen to good people, my interpretation, which I really love because it really resonated with me. Maybe I read into it differently than anybody else would. My interpretation of what he kind of gets at is that God, like he makes a comment that kind of centered it. He said, well, if somebody, if I go to a hospital and I buy a hospital bed, there was an accident or something, and somebody comes up to me and says like, boy, God was looking after her. Like he's like, no, I can't believe that, because that would say that all the people that died in accidents that God wasn't.
Yeah, right.
It says like, if somebody asked me to pray for them because I have a job interview or something, I'm gonna say, sure, I'll pray for you, but it's not gonna be because I'm gonna pray for them because I think God's gonna help them with their job interview. It's gonna be because I'm like pray that they have the strength to survive whatever the result is. And he kind of makes the point that when you're grieving, that God is manifested in the community that supports you.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it. And for me, that's it. That's
Wonderful. Yeah.
That's it. That's God. That's
Yeah.
that's all it is.
That's wonderful. My mind would use different language, but
He'd still call me an idolater.
no, you're better than the person who thinks that God saved me from the car accident,
Yeah.
Right.
because the other people are being God punished.
Is that? Yeah.
No, but
Everybody gets a G.
yeah.
Well, that's good.
That's not
Well,
possible.
we're not living.
In order to
but
want
we're
to get
not-
to J, I'm
we're not
perfectly happy outside the city
We're not
hall.
saying we're not living in the medieval world today, so we need to use different metaphors.
Yeah, I just
Right.
wonder what that idea of.
Yeah, for sure.
What Maimonides would have thought of the idea of community.
I think you could, but you couldn't have that idea with. Right, because then we'd be stuck with God, the character who's just bigger and stronger than everything, right?
So,
So you don't have to read the Bible then, right?
Well,
And.
most people do, Rabbi. That's the problem with your
Okay,
analysis.
but-
A lot of people do.
but so-
I mean, that's
so-
where I lost you,
so much
lose
of
you.
God in America is being an American, meaning. God has power and will to
But-
be an individual,
but-
but that individual is there then to help you, right? And that's so much of
Yeah.
American God, but that's not how a medieval,
Protestant.
but yeah, it's a
Yeah.
very American.
That's
Protestant,
not how
right?
Catholics, Muslims, or Jews would think about it.
Right, not how Catholic,
Right.
Muslims or Jews, and definitely Jews in the medieval world who studied like Maimonides wouldn't think of that.
but when you're saying that, that Maimonides is the greatest Jewish philosopher, you said it, or you said, remember now, but it's interesting because Hanoch, he came from a, Yemenite tradition where they did revere him,
That's her
but
husband.
then he went to yeshiva, right, Orthodox yeshiva, where they hated
Right, he
him.
went to an Ashkenazi yeshiva.
Yeah, he went, you know, so he went for a while to Ashkenazi,
Maimonides, sorry,
and
Maimonides' books were burned after.
And the French did not.
and so, I mean, I think there's
French
like a
don't
whole
do that.
strain of Judaism that doesn't think he was the greatest.
Yeah.
So he was really shocked when he came to America, and here the community of both Ashkenazic and Sephardim all study him in
Yeah.
a book. You know,
Well,
I had
because
books on my bookshelf, and he was shocked.
There were
You
certain,
know,
it's like, if I get a little history, so in the Sephardic world, parts of the Sephardic world, not all of the Sephardic world, because a lot of the Sephardic world toward Kabbalah, which was very different. But parts of the Sephardic world where Maimonides was always revered. In the Ashkenazi world, Maimonides was only read for his legal thinking.
As you
Right?
said at the
But
beginning,
then,
yeah.
19th century Germany, Maimonides, and then in 20th century America, Maimonides was rediscovered for all modern Jews.
As a exemplar of a Jew who could think rationally.
Right. This is what we went through.
Right.
So in 19th century Germany, what became the Reform movement and other streams like that, revered medieval Spartan. So Sfarad, medieval Spain, Jewish medieval Spain, because here are Jews that are living in the general culture. Here are Jews that are studying philosophy and science. Here are Jews, right? And so they said we want to distance ourselves from our you know, our grandmas in the shtetl who have baba mises and things like that, right? And we revere, this is what Judaism is, right? Now, a historian will say Judaism, there's no such thing as Judaism is, there's Judaism all at a different time in different historical contexts. But Maimonides in the 19th century Germany, especially in 20th century America, became the paradigm of what a Jew can be. Right?
You, in order to be quote a good Jew, you have to ask the question why.
If you don't ask the question why, how are you Jewish?
Well, that,
How are you not human if you don't ask?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Right?
If-
If you're dropping the question why, you're some weird rational automaton robot doing science. You're not human.
well, that I don't think. So.
No, I think there's people who don't ask why. I think there's people who don't have the capacity to ask why.
Right, and
Well-
keep it with you, and the medieval world was fine with that. Right? The medieval world was
Yeah,
not under
this
the
is-
illusion that
it
even
is-
Timmy could be
Yeah,
president.
this is like.
They had
C-
no problem telling you, sorry, you're never gonna be president.
This is
That's not
B,
happening.
this is B2 or C or
Right?
whatever.
They
these
had no
people-
problem with that, none whatsoever.
But everybody
I
had
think if
the,
you're thinking, then you're asking,
and-
you're asking questions.
right, everybody had the, unless you had a disability, I think they
Right.
might say, everybody had the capacity to, if you were trained in the right way from a young age,
Yeah.
everybody had the capacity to be rational.
But
To an
the
extent.
question of asking why is different than asking the question how.
Oh, yeah.
You can ask the question, I think people ask over and over again, you know, how is it, that.
Yeah, yeah.
One falls down, how is it that this happened? How is it that cells divide? Those are all how questions. I'm not sure you have to ask. the
Well, that,
question,
so
why the cell? divide?
So, I mean, that to me, the second point is, the why could very well be wishful thinking. That we would like there to be a why. But in truth, there is no why.
but if you don't ask the why, you can get to a place where you
Well,
have
you have a
science that
nihilistic,
does
you have a
bad
nihilistic point of view,
things.
but that might
You
be
can
truth.
get- You can get to a science that destroys
Exactly.
humanity. You can get to a science that, if you don't ask that why question, it's bad science. I think is what they're saying, because it can take you to a place where the how of it matters
No.
more than the impact of it and the causes
I don't-
of it.
I don't think that necessarily follows. I mean, we
I
could,
think it does.
yeah,
Take the why and how. Is there a difference between saying, why do people get sick, as opposed to saying, how do people get sick?
Yeah, that's the
Right,
difference.
I think there is.
Huge difference.
You can
Yeah.
define how they. get
You-
sick. You don't
you,
necessarily
you,
reach the conclusion of why they get sick.
right,
I
and
don't
you,
think I need the why though.
Yeah, that's what.
I
I'm
just
saying.
need the
Right.
how. How are people getting?
So, no, but
It even
you say I
becomes-
don't need the why.
I agree, I think that's a
Why not?
possibility.
The argument is that Judaism / what Maimonides is arguing is that that's a modern conceit of yours, that you're so quickly willing to shed the why.
Well,
People get sick.
Is it why?
Right,
or
but
is
you're
it
happy with this brute
the
fact.
purpose?
Yes,
And
But
Science doesn't do brute facts.
But why gives
You
you
need to
the,
explain it.
but then you want to go beyond facts.
Right,
Well,
and
that's
so
accurate.
science, right, and so what I'm saying, and what Maimonides is saying here is that science points beyond itself.
But I
To
also.
what end?
like it's because it's
God.
the ethics of it.
God,
it's also-
literally,
it's-
exactly.
I don't
it's,
think
it's,
you're-
But
it's
it's the
wish fulfillment.
ethics, it's the ethics of it, because the why takes you to, yes, you
Right.
get sick because things are
don't-
dirty. But if you don't ask the why, you don't say, well, things are dirty
I-
because we don't clean them, because we don't provide resources as a society. to come in there and clean.
You definitely could see it that way. You could also see it frankly as just having kind of a reductionist point of view. You could easily assess the value of science without asking why. You could easily assess a
Good versus bad science.
right or the impact on society from a rational point of view without bringing in this kind of theological thought. You could absolutely do that. You could do it two ways. That's why I kind of feel, and it's my theory of faith too. I do have faith because I don't think you could really live a good life without it. But if I step back, I can argue to myself that the faith is somewhat irrational to have.
But if you think you can't live a good life without faith, why do you think you can have good science
No,
without
because
faith?
I have faith because it makes my life livable. But if I take a step back, I could very easily talk myself out of the fact that the faith is rational.
So the faith is a crutch.
But it makes your life livable. I mean, to me, that goes back to like Camus and
It's not a crutch that we're supposed to
and
somehow
Kierkegaard.
get rid of. It's a
Right.
crutch that's part of the human condition.
part of the human condition, which makes it livable. But if you look at, do you need,
I mean, I'm just
it may,
following
it
up
may,
on
it may, it may, it may not be
following up on
true.
her analogy.
To me, I see it as.
It's the whole point that Marx said and, and Freud, and on and on.
Why do you have to have faith?
Well,
It makes it livable.
Yeah, but I would argue.
Why do you have to? We're finite
Yes,
creatures.
what do you mean by faith, Stacey?
Yeah.
Well, faith in a belief in a,
No,
We're finite creatures.
superpower.
no, that faith, I mean,
Oh.
you can have that kind of faith.
What kind of
I
faith
have,
do you talking
well, you could have, I mean, so there's some statistical probability that, if I take a step over here, then I'm gonna fall through some black hole. I mean, there's some kind of statistical
Right,
probability of
yeah.
that. I have faith that's not gonna happen. If I always calculated
Yeah,
those possibilities, I go crazy. So I have a certain amount of faith in the world.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
It
but
doesn't
then
necessarily, yeah.
let's get back to the how versus the why,
Yeah.
because if people get sick. Well, people do get sick, it's not it. Right, people get sick. People die, why? They Make room for other is that people. disease? Yes, it's
Yeah.
disease, so why, so that's the how, right, or is
Yeah,
that the why?
I think,
I
I think
haven't
we're
struggled
using,
with
I think
the
we're
word
using, I
why,
think we're using
but,
how and why overlapping terms.
Yeah.
To maybe define them again,
Right.
but because,
Why does that happen that way is a how question.
yeah,
Why does that happen in an absolute sense is a philosophical
Right.
question.
Okay,
Right.
so philosophically,
You can say, how do people get sick? Germs.
Right.
Or something like that.
Right.
The why would be, because if we were all infinite, then there'd be way too many people on here and there'd be no reason to ever have kids.
If we
To me,
did,
that's all-
Humans have to die. We are finite creatures.
if we did, if
That's
you
all
didn't
kind of
die.
how
there
thing
would be
too,
no
but
meaning.
I think,
Maybe not.
But
If you
there-
didn't die, what?
If you didn't die, there'd be no meaning in life. You would
Well,
have
the-
no,
Yeah.
you'd have no projects.
the-
How would you bang your head
that's
against
more,
the wall
that's
because
more
it
of a
feels
why
good with
question to me.
socks?
Yeah.
I remember when,
Yeah.
when Matt and I were first dating, he met my grandmother, who was then, old. And somehow got into a conversation with her, and I was just shocked, because I would never have asked her this. But asked her if she was afraid to die, or what she thought about dying. That was your opening line.
Wait, I'm sorry, Carol, this was your mother and your first,
Grandmother.
on your second date,
Well, not our second date, but.
but relatively early? Yeah, okay.
Met my mother.
Doesn't surprise me, but no.
And she took her question so seriously, and she said to me, you know, at my age, death is literally around the corner, and I have to believe that there's a God and that there is a better place.
Yeah.
I wanna go.
Sure.
Why?
And
Why do you have to?
that was how she was.
That's how she did it. Yeah, so we always make our, we always,
There's also,
Yeah.
we
but I
always
think
make
also
our,
modern Americans are way more scared of death than most people of all time.
Yeah.
Because
It's so separate.
death is not something we see.
It's also because there's no legal or systematic system or like apparatus that will tell you whether or not you make it to heaven or not.
Or that there is a heaven.
Catholics have this nice institution that says you did these laws, you get into heaven. Jews have a whole set of laws that says you get benefits if you follow the laws. Protestants have a nice feeling that they hope they can follow, but there's nobody to then ultimately say you did good.
Right. But I would even say, but like, we people in the modern West, because we don't see people die anymore, we put it away
that's true.
in institutions. It's not, we get then, therefore, we're scared of dying than other people. Than people all the time, right? And therefore, we think there are people now with the AI stuff, there are people in America who want to live forever, which, you know,
Right.
I think makes us, is the most unhuman thing,
Yeah.
because then you live forever, or even live to, 120 or whatever, like most of us, right? Your life would not have the same kind of meaning that it has, because even though we're living longer and longer, you still know it's gonna end.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what gives the bookends on your life, I would argue, is what makes love real. It's what makes
Lost and
projects meaningful. It's what
Yeah, of
makes,
course.
experience.
experience, and therefore, I would say, trying to make us eternal beings, like, Ray Kurzweil or, futurists like that want to do would be making us inhuman.
man, is that, 'cause I remember like 2 weeks ago you mentioned, because you saw a lot of death in your career. Yeah, yeah,
Most of my patients die.
yeah. No, but you said it sensitized, you said you had to obviously separate yourself from it. Do you think that? Did you change your psychology to death because of that, you think, or?
Well, I think I told you.
Yeah, you did tell me, but.
I mean,
yeah.
the way I think I dealt with death.
Yeah.
And what I saw over and over again was death was just something that happened in the hospital.
This is, oh, okay,
It didn't really happen. to me.
right, so it's a little different than what you were saying, yeah, yeah.
So
It's
it's
a little
my
different.
job to get people in the hospital to, when they're around their loved one dying, not to look at them just as a thing hooked up to a machine, right? Is to see that this is the person who is dying, and for you also maybe to contemplate that that's gonna happen to you too, right? And therefore, that moment there before you die is precious, right? And we forget that in the modern West, I think, because people are not dying in, you're not living with.
Just
your
to
parents
expand,
who
it's
died.
not just
Well,
parents,
people-
or it's not just humans we don't see die, but the entire food process.
Oh,
We
yeah,
don't-
Yeah,
Eric, you're so right, oh my God.
We're
So,
completely removed from
When
that
I,
whole
when I,
process.
in Torah study,
Oh,
Leviticus, it's all about sacrifice.
Consciously
stuff,
done.
And we think it's so weird, it's because you don't live with animals that you have to kill by your own hands
Yeah.
to eat,
Right.
right?
Huge
We
difference.
believe, we don't eat animals, we eat pieces of
Packages.
protein that are packaged.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay?
It's
I mean,
very true.
Jews used to have shrouds in their drawers from the time they were married, so that when they died, they were ready.
Yeah,
They used to die at home. They used to guard their
Everybody.
families' bodies at home.
Yeah.
They would do shomrim in the house
Yeah.
with everyone there, and then bury them. And so it was a process. It was that everyone was connected to, and there's something I think healthy about it. And, not to be so separated from it, not to be so afraid.
I do think it's important that, for instance, children be exposed to death.
100%.
And that they not be isolated from it. I don't think seeing death makes you feel any more comfortable with death.
No.
I do think that for myself, I'm now getting to Bob's age, and you start to think about those kinds of things. And for myself, I figured out what death is like. And I'm fairly comfortable. It's just like it was before I was born. It was like chaos. It's an experience. So knowing that.
Exactly.
I think death gives us a better appreciation for how to live now.
Yeah. What is light if you've never experienced darkness?
Yeah,
Makes no
but-
sense. It would make no sense. You have no idea what light is if you've never experienced darkness.
Wow, everybody's head all good now?
Can't have a happy note unless you know that it doesn't last.
Exactly, right? Harmony only
I'm
works if
okay
there's
with
cacophony.
dying. I'm not okay with these people living forever and these horrible lives. that they
Oddly,
have.
I mean, they're,
No, we don't do
you
it.
know, in Hollywood that they make fun of like the Ageless Institute where they try to get billionaires to give them all their money and live together and try this green soda, it'll make you live to
Oh,
150.
Yeah.
Those things exist now. They're actually starting to pop up.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
They actually exist. This is a community for people who do want to live longer.
Yeah.
Right, like these whole things where we
Okay.
do cutting edge technologies, like that thing you see in the movies in the 80s and 90s is now happening.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Some place like that, I wonder if that's what it was about.
That's exactly it. It's one of
Right.
those. It's high-end, we'll
Sense.
feed you green drinks and weird meds and hopefully you'll live
I
forever.
want to be able to eat that Snickers because life is short, right?
Well, and there's biotech companies that are studying, you know, why do life live longer? Why do I live
Those
longer?
places, though, they
Without
also
the drugs.
include like educational seminars.
Yes,
Friend,
absolutely.
Thank you again for studying. We're back
Thank you,
in,
Eric.
no, we're back in 3 weeks after Thanksgiving. Right, and then we're gonna take a break for a little bit, before we come back in January to learn more about the hard sciences. of-
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. no,
of
you-
biology.
lots of these-
Are we gonna be studying
Right.
something during December?
Tangible.
So.
Uh,